Income Tax 2020, Practice Problem 1, Presentation 23, Itemized Deductions, Interest you pay, this time with the tax formula we will be working within an Excel worksheet. Come in, relax with Income Tax 2020. Here we are in our Lacerte tax software. You don't need the Lacerte tax software to follow along. However, I do believe they have a 30-day free trial, so if you can get access to a promo or demo version of it or any other tax software, it could be a good tool to practice with. We're going to be continuing on with our comprehensive practice problem number 1, this time taking a look at the Excel formula in an Excel worksheet. Just to recap where we have been, in the first section, we entered the data for the total income at the $81,030. Then in the second section, we entered the information for the above-the-line deductions, that being the $15,600. And then now we're going to be focusing in on the standard deduction or itemized deduction. We're going to be taking the itemized deduction as we list those items, this being the item that's going to push us over to the itemizing that of the mortgage interest. So let's see what we have on the Schedule A and the forms first. So on the Schedule A, we're going to say we have now the mortgage interest of that $16,000. That's coming from the Form 1098. So the mortgage interest will typically come from the 1098. If I go back into the Excel worksheet then, now we want to think about putting this into the formula separately from the source document, not from basically the tax return. So we would be pulling this information from the same source document, the 1098, to double check that our numbers have been data input correctly and we haven't made an error there. And this also will give us a nice comparison to see as easily as possible what is going on, because the formula is going to be the most simplistic way to visualize this in our minds. So we're going to be taking then the same source document, that being the 1098. We're going to be putting that into our Excel worksheet. Remember that the 1098 is probably the next item with regards to itemizing of highest importance, meaning you're probably going to go through the income line items first, the W-2s, the 1098s, and whatnot. And then when you get to the deductions, mortgage interest, the 1098 related to it is probably the biggest one you're looking at, and it's probably the one that's going to be one of the big deciding factors as to whether you should be gathering the other items within the itemized deductions to see if it'd be worthwhile to do so, to see if it would be greater than or possibly greater than the standard deduction. Okay, so we're looking at this line item here, or these two line items, basically this one, and we're looking for that one to be over the $24,800. So we're going to go then to this schedule, which is going to be the supporting documentation for it. And we're going to be entering then the interest is going to be the $16,000 we said. Was that what we said? Pretty sure was the $16,000, right? So there we have that. Now there's one other kind of item that's going to be a little funny, and that's going to be the charitable contributions, because you'll note now we're at the $28,962 now. And that means that the charitable contributions are also kicking in here. So we had contributions to charity of that $500. The thing that's confusing about that is that we have that above the line deduction as well. So in other words, this number, the $28,962, would then be pulling over to the tax formula here. And that's greater than the $24,800. That's great. So that means that we're going to be taking the itemized deduction. Notice our formula over here is basically saying if cell 6C6, which is going to be this item, is greater than C7, then take cell C6, meaning take the greater one. If not, you want a 0 here, and then this one is doing the same thing. It's taking the greater of the two. If you that's how the Excel sheet's set up. If you want to learn those if-then formulas, you can kind of set those up so you can, they're not too complicated to set up if you were doing your own Excel worksheet. So there's going to be the $28,962. Then we have this adjustment up top, though, which is taking into account those charitable contributions if you were not itemizing. So I got to adjust that. So I'm going to go to the adjustments to income here. That $300 right there, I'm going to remove that. Now, again, you could use some complex if-then formula here, too, to kind of catch that data input problem. But I like it almost not to do that so that you can see those little tweaks in the system. If you completely automate your Excel sheet, then it's basically just the same as putting it into the tax return, because you're depending on the Excel sheet to do some calculations for you. So I like to be able to see that and say, oh, okay, that means that thing right there is going to be messing it up. That's what's messing it up, and that helps me to know what is happening. So I don't like to totally automate the entire worksheet, but you can. It depends what you want to do. So then we're going to be back on over here, and let's just double check our itemized deductions then. We're at the bottom line on the itemized deductions at the 28,962. If we go then to the tax return and take a look at the itemized deductions, we're at the 28,962, so that looks correct. Going back to the first page of the 1040, then we go back to the first page of our tax formula. Let's double check these. We have then the adjusted gross income is now at the 65,430. 65,430 at the adjusted gross income. Same here. That looks good. And then we have the itemized deductions. We just checked at the 28,962 to get to the bottom line of the 36,468. That should match here. We got the 36,468. So we got the 65,430. We're taking the greater of the two, being the itemized deduction, to bring us down to the taxable income of the 63,468. Then I'm going to let the system calculate the tax now, which has changed now that we're itemizing. So 63,468, 63,468. Then page 2, I'm going to actually pull this from the tax software. I'm going to let the software do the tax calculation. 3826, and that's going to be 3826. And that one, I'm not doing that one just because that doesn't help me not to automate the system. If you could automate the system to do the tax calculation within Excel, it might be a good thing for a double check there. But again, I'm not going to do that basically because it's past the level of complexity that I want to get into. So I'm going to be reliant on the software to some degree. But again, you can automate that if you want to use an Excel and have it do the calculation, so you can check the calculation for you. And then we've got the 8,000 here, and that's from the W-2s, and that gives us our refund of the 4,174. And so we have then the 4,174 bottom line, so it ties out.